Kennedy, in a recent article by Fox News, you were quoted as saying, "If I was allowed to attack the website by myself and I had approval to go and do it, it would be very simple for me to break into it, steal all the information that's in the database, including all of your personal information that you used to register for the site, Social Security numbers, everything like that." Basically, that is what you were saying to one of the previous members who was talking about Mr. Chow's sister. You mentioned that you'd like to have 2 days to get into access her information. We've also learned today that these systems are integrated, that they are talking back and forth, that there's integration between Healthcare.gov and the IRS website and Homeland Security and others. How would you be able to get into Healthcare.gov and then use it to get into the IRS website?
Without knowing enough about the infrastructure behind it, I can't say yes or no. However, what I can say is that as attackers and as hackers break into infrastructure, they usually use a conduit, a website, to use a trusted connection back to other infrastructure to gain access to that back end. So without understanding infrastructure, I can't say yes 100%. But based on the information that we know, you can look at the privacy. If you look at the privacy policy on the website itself, it shows who it actually interacts with and the type of information that's sent. If you look at that, it's pretty indicative that you could, use that Healthcare.gov as a leaping point and kind of a back door into the other agencies, other federal portions of government like the IRS or DHS. And again, I can't say without certainty, but it's definitely a common technique that a hacker would use to do it. It's called what we call, pivoting and further attacking into the infrastructure.
And gentlemen, based on that information, would you have recommended that Healthcare.gov be walled off from other federal government databases that have very sensitive information?
Let me address your first question, and then I'll address the second question. First, just one clarification that it's not the IRS website. It's a back-end database at the IRS that's being accessed. And the way the data is being accessed is through this hub where requests are being sent. And so if the site were designed with proper security, with good security practices and principles, there would be a very, very limited interface between Healthcare.gov and the IRS, where the IRS's database responses would be very limited in their nature. They could only answer certain queries to answer eligibility questions. If the site were designed very poorly and the interface was designed poorly, then I think that could be open. I don't know what kind of design they use, but in my written testimony, I talked about focusing on those interfaces, keeping them very simple and very basic, and using the hub simply to query those back-end databases at these other sites and get the responses back.
Mr. Wright.
I think one of the challenges, and this is why I went back and confirmed after Congressman Kennedy said that, is that you still have to provide this information up front. So part of the issue you could get to make the site more secure and make it function better is to not put all this overhead on the initial transaction, because the closer you are to the presentation layer to where the user is actually interfacing with it, means it's easier to get that information. To your point, not necessarily walled off and playing off what Dr. Rubin said, but I'd like to push that kind of transaction back farther to where I can maintain better security. My security perimeter gets smaller. I can defend against things better, as opposed to the Great Wall of China. We're trying to secure the Great Fence of China. And instead what I want to do is have a smaller, tighter core that I can defend against and have that data hub, and those types of transactions happen in a smaller, confined area. You can't wall it off because it still has to interface, but you can reduce the risk and the threats by reducing the amount of ways and the places that, to David's point, an attacker can come in, because they will do that. They will come in and they will use the same methodologies. The same 7-stage terrorism planning cycle that's in the traditional world is also used in cyber terrorism.
Well, we do know that there are countries that hire hackers, the governments that hire hackers that attempt to hack into information in the United States all the time. And we know that some of those government-hired hackers hack for their government by day, and they hack for hire by night. And so there are mercenary hackers out there that will hack for money. Mr. Kennedy, are there vulnerabilities that you've not identified publicly out of fear that the consequences are so exploitable that it would be like telling a criminal where you hide the spare key to your house?
Yes, there is. There are exposures that I've identified that are not public.
Have you identified them to someone who can use them to plug those holes?
Yes, I have. Yep. Anytime that I discover an exposure or criticality, it's sent to the appropriate people to get addressed and fixed. That's where we come in from the responsible disclosure side of doing the right thing.
Gentlemen, I really thank you for your expertise and your presence here today. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Lummis.